Guys, don't get the wrong idea. We're not going to start beginning every episode with a Biden flub. But I thought this one was both important and kind of hilarious.
Reported last week, 56% of Americans said that they were better off today than they were 4 years ago, would have been under the Obama-Biden administration. So why should people who feel that they are better off today under the Trump administration vote for you?
Well, if they think that, they probably shouldn't. They think 54% of American people were better off economically today than they were in our administration. Well, their memory is not very good, quite frankly. And in addition to that, we have a president who doesn't share the values of most Americans.
I haven't, in all my years watching politics, I've never heard a politician tell a pundit that 56% of the population should not vote for them. But there you have it, folks. Man, I don't know, guys. I don't know what to say about that. I just wanted to share it with you. All right, let's get on with the episode. Many times on this show, we've had talks about government officials and how easily they lie. I've pointed out to you the outright lies of several individuals in detail. The most recent one being Dr. Fauci lying about masks. This is another episode about lying. But again, just like with Fauci, it's not so much the lie itself that really disturbs me and should really disturb my audience. And people who aren't in my audience, as long as you're American citizens for that matter. And that is the ease with which they tell the lie. Fauci said it so nonchalantly that half of the American population was like, oh, okay, you lied to us because you wanted to hoard the masks for healthcare workers. We understand. And never had a thought to themselves, wait a minute, why didn't you just tell me like an adult that masks help, but we need to limit the purchasing power so that the healthcare workers could have them? Most people never even had that thought. And now we come to Anonymous, the supposed high-level cabinet official that wrote the New York Times OpEd in September of 2018. Remember, the guy that people all around the interwebs were saying the New York Times, the paper of record, would never publish something unless it was a cabinet official. Remember? Anybody who said this is some assistant, mid-level, somebody not even in D.C. was attacked, again, like always, for having a differing point of view. And this supposed anonymous individual wrote a book. It's a New York Times bestseller. So not only did the Times put this person in their op-ed as if they were freaking Mike Pence, but it went on to become a New York Times #1 bestseller. A warning, Anonymous. Surely this was a cabinet official. Was it James Baker? Was it General Mattis? Remember? Do you remember all the names that were floated? And how does the book describe itself in Amazon? #1, New York Times #1, and Wall Street Journal bestseller. An unprecedented behind-the-scenes portrait of the Trump presidency from the anonymous senior official whose first words of warning about the president rocked the nation's capital. Wow. Truly unbelievable. And although they were very tight-lipped about who Anonymous was, they would ask outgoing former officials from the Trump administration if they knew anything about it, no matter how low level they happened to be. This guy right here got out of the Trump administration and started immediately castigating Trump for everything. We're going to watch a couple of videos about him. And in this first one, he's asked whether or not he's anonymous. I want y'all to key on that. But I'm going to be interrupting, like I do.
As you mentioned, the president's mental acuity was discussed daily by senior members of the administration, including those in the cabinet. I mean, there was that story early on about the 25th Amendment having been discussed. Was that ever something that you became aware of?
Yeah, Anderson, I'll be frank with you. That's not really something that I can comment on, at least at the moment. But what I will say is this. On a very regular basis, you would have these last-minute fire drills where the president would make spontaneous, unplanned, uncoordinated, ill-considered decisions from the White House, and his cabinet would have to drop everything to try to go address those challenges.
My God! Anderson, listen. I'm not in a position to say anything on the record as an official, but I could tell you for sure, Trump would make decisions on his own and then the cabinet would have to go do their job. It was insane, Anderson. It was crazy.
It seemed like a big deal if it happens every once in a while. Look, every president deserves to, think up new ideas and have his cabinet respond to them. But
does he? Does he really, Miles? Because it doesn't feel like you think that every president has the ability to do that or the right. You sound like the former ambassadors in Ukraine.
Talking about weekly unplanned emergencies, it has a waterfall effect on the operations of the entirety of the federal government. The taxpayers that are watching this expect their government to hum along, get their job done, protect the American people.
You're damn right we do. One thing we don't expect our government officials to be doing is writing anonymous letters to the New York Times and then turning around and getting rich off of a book deal while you're anonymous.
Social Security checks out, but when these fire alarms would happen at the White House, it would have that waterfall effect on every.
So fire alarm is code for the president said something and now we have to work.
And it would make it really difficult for people to get their jobs done. And I want to give you a specific example, Anderson. We do a lot more at the Department of Homeland Security in this country than just protect the nation's borders. It's a very important mission, but it's only part of the mission of the Department of Homeland Security. DHS is responsible for stopping cyber attacks, terrorist attacks, nation-state threats from foreign foes. But the president wanted to spend about 95.
So he says cyber attacks, nation-state attacks from foreign foes, right? Terrorism, right? Those are the things that he cites they wanted to tell Trump about. Pay attention.
Of his time focused on border.
The president wanted to focus on the border. Okay.
White House at one point, this is probably in 2008, and we said, look, there's something we used to do in the Bush administration called Terror Tuesdays. Every Tuesday.
So Terror Tuesdays.
The president's national security team would sit down with George W. Bush and talk about the terror threats to the country.
Okay, so every Tuesday, the president's staff would get together and tell the president about all those terrorist threats, especially the three that he just mentioned just a second ago. So I guess he's going to suggest that they tried to redo Terror Tuesday, right?
Why don't we do something called Threat Thursdays?
Threat Thursdays? Wait a minute. But I thought it was Terrorism Tuesdays. Why do you guys got to rename it? Are you doing something different than talking about other nation states, cybercrime, and foreign interference?
And with the president, we'll talk to him about all these other threats he's not really spending time on because he's too focused on the border. We got blown off.
Let me go out on a limb and say, you really wanted to sit down with Trump and talk about the existential threat of domestic white terrorists. Something just tells me that's what you wanted to talk to him about. And something just tells me I know why he blew you off.
Proposal again. We got blown off. We made the proposal again to the White House Chief of Staff. We got blown off. That never.
But Mr. President, what about white supremacists?
Happening. So the president ended up, I would say, very ill-informed about some of the most serious threats to our country because he didn't, quite frankly, spend the time to focus on those issues.
Oh, thanks, Miles Taylor. Miles Taylor, here he is spoon-feeding the CNN audience why the president knows nothing about white nationalism and white supremacy. Talk about a dog whistle.
About them.
That's really, that's alarming.
That's really alarming.
There was an op-ed, there was a book by someone calling themselves Anonymous. Are you aware of who that is?
I'm not. Look, and that was a parlor game that happened in Washington, D.C. of a lot of folks trying to think of who that might be. I've got my own thoughts about who that might be, but I want my focus to be on the president, and I certainly don't want to. I wear a mask for two things, Anderson: Halloweens and pandemics. So
I wear a mask for two things, Anderson: Halloweens and pandemics. Gosh, that's so witty. What a witty response, Miles.
You said that more former administration officials would be joining, would be coming out and talking about what they have witnessed firsthand.
Yeah, so did Scaramucci, and it just turns out everybody who leaves and speaks out ends up being a real bad D-bag.
What sort of level of I mean, are you talking about cabinet members? Are you talking about people who've worked in the White House?
Well, we will see. My direct messages are open on Twitter, and I'm in contact with a lot of folks. Excited to report.
He literally just mentioned DMs. I bet you he's part of the DM that who was the guy who was going to be the debate moderator, but he got in trouble for tweeting Scaramucci when he accidentally meant to DM him. I bet you they're in like a little DM group.
That we have a full-page ad running in the Wall Street Journal of former Republican national security officials who are supporting Joe Biden, and we've managed to pull on 2 more senior ex-Trump administration officials onto that list. One, an incredible man named John Mitnick, who was one of the top lawyers in the Trump administration, and another, Elizabeth Newman, who was one of the main counterterrorism leaders in the Trump administration. Both were appointees of Donald Trump, and both have decided he is unfit to be president, and he's dangerous to our national security.
You mean there's a couple people angry at their boss after they got fired? That's a shock.
Hear from both John and Elizabeth soon, and I think you'll hear from some others in addition to them.
Boy, doesn't that sound an awful lot like Scaramucci's tweet? Oh, Trump's got some bad stuff on the way. Just ignore him. Unbelievable. So, this is Miles Taylor. He's a low-level government employee. He was the Deputy Department of Homeland Security, and he was the interim Department of Homeland Security for a little while. He's most certainly a member of the Senior Executive Service. But he's nowhere near a cabinet official. Anonymous was a cabinet official. Remember? He was like as big as Mike Pence or General Mattis. He was inside the circle, right? Miles here, he keeps a straight face this entire interview, doesn't he? I didn't detect one lie. It's like this. Either he didn't lie once or he was lying the entire interview, right? Because his demeanor never changed at all.
Breaking news for you, the identity of Anonymous revealed. We now know who the senior administration official was who wrote that alarming 2018 New York Times op-ed titled, "I am part of the resistance inside the Trump administration," which detailed how the author and other members of the Trump administration deliberately worked to undermine orders by President Trump for the good of the nation because they believed President Trump was amoral and damaging the United States. The official also wrote a book called A Warning, published late last year. Now CNN has learned the identity of that anonymous author, which has been a source of a great deal of speculation. That anonymous senior administration official is the now former chief of staff at the Department of Homeland Security, Miles Taylor.
Oh, he's got a picture with the president. The former chief of staff to the Department of Homeland Security. Excuse me. That's That's not the same thing. Sorry. He's the former chief of staff to the Department of Homeland Security. Yikes.
The statement just released, Taylor says, quote, "I wrote a warning, a character study of the current commander-in-chief, and a caution to voters that it wasn't as bad as it looked inside the Trump administration. It was worse. While I claim sole authorship of the work..."
You're not
Beyond
anonymous.
the president, and I certainly don't want to. I wear a mask for 2 things, Anderson: Halloweens and pandemics.
While I claim sole authorship of the work, the sentiments expressed within it were widely held among officials at the highest levels of the federal government. In other words, Trump's own lieutenants were alarmed by his instability. Taylor, who has now become an outspoken critic of President Trump publicly, explains in this statement that he remained anonymous in the op-ed so the focus could stay on his words instead of Trump's insults. Taylor is now revealing his identity 6 days before Election Day, warning that President Trump will be unbound in a second term and push the limits of his power, and that President Trump has made the U.S. less safe and less united.
Oh, wow, look at that. There's a picture of him in the background, too, on Trump. Hold on, let's get to that now. We want to show him to be as close to Trump as possible. There he is. You think Trump knows he's standing there?
United, Taylor adding in his statement, quote, "I was wrong, however, about one major assertion in my original op-ed. The country cannot rely on well-intentioned, unelected bureaucrats around the president to steer him toward what's right. He has purged most of them anyway."
This is amazing news. What you're hearing right here is what you're hearing right here is a deep state operative bemoaning the fact that Trump's gotten rid of most of the deep state operatives. This is seriously the best news I can bring to you guys through this entire circus. This is the best news I could bring to you. The deep state, who is speaking right now, that would be Anderson Cooper, on their channel, that would be CNN, is interviewing one of their operatives, that would be Miles, and their operative on their channel being interviewed by their host is bemoaning the fact that Trump's kicked them all out. Woo!
Can the country rely on Congress to deliver us from Trump's wayward...
And Congress is falling in line. Yes!
whims? The people themselves are the ultimate check on the nation's chief executive.
Yeah, why do you think we put him there, Miles? Hopefully, if after one more term, we can dig out most of you ticks.
Now, after the release of the 2018 op-ed, President Trump called it gutless and a disgrace. He questioned on Twitter
Whoa, turns out Trump was right again, guys.
whether it was treason, and the White House press secretary at the time,
Hell yeah, it's treason.
Sarah Sanders, said, quote, "This coward should do the right thing and resign." We have reached out to the White House for comment on the newly revealed identity. We will bring that to you when we get it. We should
Listen, Jake Tapper's not going to bring you the White House's comment on this. The next time Trump is stumping, he's going to tell you about the White House's response to this. And it's probably going to be hilarious.
Miles Taylor is also now a CNN contributor, although we
Of course he is.
know this until today.
Right. It just happens that your channel lines up perfectly with the guy who wrote the anonymous New York Times article. Isn't it funny that they're like, we didn't know he was this guy. Yeah, I know, but you still managed to hire him because you are going to suck up every anti-Trump parasite there is. So here we go, guys. Miles. This is anonymous. The senior cabinet official. This is definitely not General Mattis. This is definitely not James Baker. But isn't it interesting the ease with which he told that lie? I only wear masks for pandemics and Halloweens. I find it funny people still try to convince me there's no such thing as the deep state. Anyways, guys, like, share, sub the channel. If you want to throw me a tip, all the ways to do so are in the pinned comment below. Talk to you guys later. Peace.